People always think of Pete Rose watching each pitch all the way into the catcher's glove. How he lost his helmet every time he ran the bases. How Alex Grammas would windmill the runners around third base. We'll always recall how you could still see the football lines crossing the baseball diamond.
The second baseman, Joe Morgan.
We'll always hear the sounds of Paul Summercamp introducing the team. Or Sparky explaining why things happened or why they didn't. Or polka bands performing in and out of the ballpark. I love defense. The way Bench would apply the tag and then walk away like nothing happened. I love the way the defense keyed the Reds in the 1990 postseason with great plays from the outfield. It's hard to forget the image of the Zamboni, that little bullpen car. Lou coming completely unglued, and the circus for all ages that we know as opening day. But one of my favorite images was watching the fans get a chance for the first time to run the bases in 1996. Riverfront Stadium, Synergy Field might soon be gone, but these are images that are going to be with us forever.
11 o'clock. Al Shufflecutty News Time.
Good evening. Baseball history tonight at Riverfront Stadium.
It was June 16th of 1978 that baseball led the El Shufflecutty News. That night at Riverfront Stadium, Tom Seaver threw a no-hitter at the St. Louis Cardinals. The final out coming when George Hendrick bounced out to Dan Dreesen at first base.
Tom, did your stuff diminish at the end, or how were you going?
I got better at the end. I had better stuff late than I did early.
38,000 fans were there to see the only no-hitter of Seaver's Hall of Fame career, and the first no-hitter pitched by a Red since the new stadium had opened.
I was exceptionally proud, sure. I mean, it's a great moment, and the fans enjoyed it, and they gave me a huge ovation, and I acknowledge that, and they give me ovations every time I went out from about the 6th inning on.
From outside the clubhouse, Seaver talked live with Channel 9's Frank Sellers, as his two young daughters showed a lot more interest in their soft drinks. But plenty of excitement in June of '78. It was the biggest news
Captain, this is the only ball. This is my professional home and has been since I got here in 1974. I don't know anything else. And so when we move into Great American Ballpark next April, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be state-of-the-art. It's going to be everything that you could possibly want it to be, but it's also going to have some awfully big shoes to fill.
I remember when we moved from Crosley Field and what a fan-friendly place Crosley Field was, and all the hype about the Riverfront Stadium and how much better it was going to be fan-friendly and a lot more things for fans to do and conveniences and so on and so forth. And I guess the same thing is being preached right now as we get ready to move to Great American Ballpark.
I don't believe there's been a 32-year history, 32-year period in the history of this franchise, and I think you can go all the way back to the beginning, that has been more productive with more great teams, more great players, more great events than in the 32 years that have gone since this ballpark opened in 1970.
If you look at 5 World Series and 3 World Championship teams, Johnny Bench's home run, Pete's base hit, Tom Browning's perfect game.
And I remember the night, the second game of the World Series in 1990 when I made a public appeal to Tom Browning to come back to the ballpark. He had gone because his wife Debbie was about to give birth, and Lou called up and said, "Tell Marty that we got to get Browning back to the ballpark."
I can walk out of here right now and say, well, it's been great, let's go play in the new ballpark. But that's easy to say. Once you start hearing different individuals talking about their biggest moment here and so on, then it might be a different story.
Have you thought of anything? Are you saving anything special for that last call from here? Last pitch, last out?
No, my philosophy has always been you go with the flow and you say what you feel at the time it happens. I never planned anything when Pete got the record-breaking hit. I never planned what I would say when Tom Browning finished off his perfect game if he got it. I'm sure there will be some reflection when the last out is made. And I may shed a tear or two. I mean, I don't do that. It's going to be tough to leave here. And we'll see what happens.
Well, here we go. Top half of the 9th inning. The spotlight is on the mound where Tom Browning enters the 9th, having retired 24 batters in a row.
I was very intense. I was very focused on what I had to do, and my intensity was there the whole 9th.
Bottom 1/3 are the batting order for the Los Angeles Dodgers, namely Rick Dempsey, Steve Sachs, and a hitter for pitcher Tim Belcher. And here comes his 1-1 to Dempsey. And it's hit in the air to right field. O'Neill moving toward the line. He's under, and he makes the catch. 1 out. And now it is second baseman Steve Sachs. The pitch is swung on, ground ball up the middle. Larkin's got it. His throw to first. 2 out. And now it will be Tracy Woodson to pinch hit for Tim Belcher. And Browning is 1 out away. They are all up and on their feet and rooting individually and collectively for Browning to get one final out. He is ready for the 2-2 to Woodson, and here it comes. And it is swung out and missed. And Tom Browning has pitched a perfect game. 27 outs in a row, and he is being mobbed by his teammates just to the third base side of the mound.
I don't think there was any player out there who did not get caught up in what happened.
I'd like to relive that 10 minutes after the game, the first 10 minutes after I struck the guy out for forever.
And now Browning being hoisted to the shoulders of his teammates. And boy, what a memorable scene on a wet, dreary evening here in Cincinnati. A night that the fans had to wait 2 hours and 27 minutes for. And brother, was the wait worthwhile. And this one belongs to the Reds.
This was the time. Pete Rose, and some were very glad of it.
I hope he gets a hit on the first time up, so release my tension. I told her I'm going to have a heart attack.
The fans at Riverfront were ready to burst at the seams. They were ready to explode when he finally came to bat in the first inning. Again, the fans left their seats, and they stood, hoping to get a good look at history. Pete's mom took a deep breath and watched with 50,000 others.
1 ball and no strikes. Rose swinging and fouling it straight back. And again, the flash bulbs go off all over the ballpark. Last night, the first time I have ever seen that in a baseball stadium. The 1-1 coming, and Rose takes it inside. He levels the bat a couple of times. Shao kicks and he fires. Rose swings. There it is! There it is! Get out! Get out! All right! Hit number 4192.
The moment was overwhelming. Pete's brother David put his arms around his mother. They embraced and cried for the next several minutes. The Reds players came out of the dugout. They hoisted their hero manager onto their shoulders. And there was a love affair at Riverfront Stadium between those in the stands and number 14, who had just conquered one of baseball's greatest records. Owner Marge Schott came out, hugged Rose, and presented him with a new Corvette, license number 4192, of course. Well, the Padres sat and waited. The stadium shouted, cried, and clapped. Finally, the moment got the best of Rose. He had to brush back a tear. He looked to Tommy Helms for support, and then his son Petey raced out of the dugout and hugged his dad at a very touching moment. It was something everyone was feeling.
How can you not be emotional? I mean, people that just are fans were emotional, so why shouldn't he? I think it's very, I'm glad he got emotional. It's right to the heart.
It was the hit literally heard round the world, and it was a typical Pete Rose hit. Going with a pitch, hitting it solidly, a
the
clean
fans
hit.
gathered around not because they see me, but because Johnny Bench has stepped down from that press conference. Take me back to 1970 when you guys moved over to Crosley Field. You look at this place. It's not tidy. It's not cozy. It's really futuristic. What'd you guys think?
Oh, state of the art. I mean, the one thing that I always remember is walking in that locker room. That was the biggest moment. I mean, I love the idea, the fact that we actually had room where we could turn around and dress. I mean, you know, you'd be putting somebody's pants on at Crosley Field, and it'd be your pants and his pants. You'd be in one leg apiece. I mean, you had to go outside to change your mind. So this was a great for us. I mean, it was such a perfect field. You had a little bit of distance from the stands that you could go up and still sign autographs and keep your distance. But also the AstroTurf. I mean, I loved the AstroTurf. Even though I didn't play on it, I actually played on the dirt all my career mostly. So but all I knew was that, you know, know, if it rained in Crosley Field, I wasn't sure we were going to play. Here, it was just always such a beautiful sight to come out, see the AstroTurf in those days, know that you were going to have a game played, and it was very special to all of us.
Everybody has their special Johnny Bench moment, but I'll tell you what, 1972 is as good as any of them in the playoffs when you tied up the game. Does that one still, if you hear Al Michaels' call, I still get chills when I see that.
Yeah, I mean, the echoes still reverberate. I mean, some of them got out through the center field area, but when I hear that, I actually still get chills. I mean, it was the most important moment. The staticism of all of it. And, of course, in that day, I knew that it could be my last game because I had lung surgery December the 9th, and so I knew it might be my last game. So there was a lot of things going on in my mind. And for all the people who stood there, and you know, I guess if you hope so long, and it's the 5th game, it's all the drama that you really want, and then to be able to hit a home run to tie the game back up, and then to have the wild pitch and score that. I don't know that if anybody could have had more excitement at any one time than we had.
Well, then your final home run, I was listening to that the other day and watching it, and I was down on the field for that one, but listening to Nuxie, I think he almost fell off his chair because he couldn't believe you had hit the home run in the night that everybody came out to honor you.
Well, that's my most important moment of that night as well. I mean, being treated by 55,000 fans, but at the same time, the emotion in which Joe Nuxall called that particular home run. You could actually hear the real deep emotion, almost tears coming in, and it was very special.
Will you shed a tear today?
No.
No?
No, it's all memories from my players.
Good deal. Thanks for
wrapping us up here. Yeah. Caroline, does this mean wrap?
Yeah.
Okay,
it still does.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Pete Rose spent time at Riverfront Stadium as a Philly, then as an Expo, and it never seemed right. But on August 16th of 1984, he was back on his home turf as manager-player of the Cincinnati Reds.
There's no question I'll make some mistakes. Everybody does, but who hasn't?
Welcome back, Pete. It's so nice to have you back where you belong.
A night later, Rose was serenaded in the clubhouse.
Number 14, at first base, Pete Rose.
And he was given a loud and lengthy ovation when his name was first announced. The game was delayed to accommodate all the fans who had walked up to the gate. And this is what the commotion was all about. In the very first inning, Rose singled, and when the outfielder misplayed the ball, he came all the way around to third base, head first, of course. A dirty uniform after only one inning. The hustle had returned to Riverfront.
If any of his pitchers had thrown like this 30 years ago, Sparky would have been out to the mound giving them the hook. Sparky Anderson trying to make the ceremonial first pitch to Johnny Bench at Synergy Field today. It took a few tries. They finally got it done.
Field isn't the last, of course. Tomorrow, the farewell to Riverfront softball game will feature fan favorites from the Big Red Machine, including Pete Rose, taking on all other all-star greats from the game's past.
I've been treated like a king with the Cincinnati fans. You know, from my first hit to my 4,000th hit, to the hit streak, to the 41-92, and of course the last hit I got in August of 1986.
The last ever game at Synergy Field. Jose Rijo excited the crowd and himself, apparently, with a strikeout of Travis Lee in the first. But this one did not end on a high note. Marlon Anderson's high sac fly to center looks like it's got the distance, but it doesn't. Proved to be the game winner, though. Lee comes around to score. Phillies take it 4-3. But that is when the good stuff started. Fans said goodbye to Synergy in their own ways. Former Reds greats were called back to the baselines. Ken Griffey Sr., Johnny Bench, David Concepcion, Tom Browning, you name it. Hall of Famer Tony Perez gave a tip of the cap to the Cincinnati fans, while Jose Rijo showed why baseball fans just loved him. He was throwing out everything he could get his hands on. Ray Knight put a rose in the middle of the Wishbone C during the postgame, and then home plate was lifted out of its spot in Synergy and placed in its new home just across the way in the Great American Ballpark.
Okay, we've told you about this all night. More highlights from that big softball game. Let's throw it over to Greg Horde. He has all the details.
Thanks, y'all. This is big. The man called Pete the Hit King coming back home for a final moment in the stadium where he did so much to please so many. Pete Rose performing the last act in a place that was always his stage. My partner Dan Horde is standing by live with a story. Pete's farewell to Riverfront Synergy. Dan?
Greg, thanks very much. Pete Rose, of course, finished his career with 4,256 hits, the all-time record in Major League Baseball. 1,019 of them came in this stadium, and Pete says most of his favorite moments in baseball happened right here at Riverfront/Synergy. It was appropriate to have him back for the last event ever here, and the night was perfect, right down to the final announced attendance figure. Many of baseball's biggest stars over the past 30 years were in attendance, but they knew the fans weren't here to see them.
Well, I mean, this is a softball game in Cincinnati, but let's face it, I mean, this is for Pete Rose, and this city could not wait to come out here and support him.
Eventually, we hope that they'll be able to put his number out there with John's and mine and the rest of the guys, but this will be good, and the fans here will show him that they appreciate it.
I think that's the greatest thing for the fans, the greatest thing for me, to see him on the field again.
4 hours before the game, Pete was in a ticket booth signing autographs. The line to get one included thousands of people and wrapped around the stadium.
Went up to Pete, and he was just smiling. I told him the truth. He's the greatest ball player that ever lived. He was joking. He said, "What, is Babe Ruth here?" And I said, "No, it's you, my friend."
You didn't have to be old enough to have seen him play to want a free Pete Rose bobblehead or to think that he belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Let's all root for the Hit King, but ceiling's insane.
I think it's great for the young kids to be here tonight because they didn't get to see bench play or me or Morgan or Schmidt or Dawson or Dwight Gooden, and just hope they don't judge us on our performance tonight. There's only one guarantee I can give you tonight about the game. You will not see me do a head-first slide. Because, to be honest with you, I can't get going fast enough to do it.
The first event for the former players was a home run hitting contest won by George Foster with 8 pokes over the wall. And while fans cheered during that, they went bananas when Pete was introduced.
The fans can make you feel really good. They've always made me feel good. The key to that is don't let them clap too long. If they clap too long, then it really gets to you.
While Pete's daughter Shay did a nice job of singing the anthem, the Reds legends didn't fare well in the softball game. Andre Dawson and Ryne Sandberg belted 2 home runs apiece as the All-Stars beat the locals 19-6. As for Pete, after grounding out his first 2 times up, he singled past Mike Schmidt in his final at-bat, then went against his pregame promise with a head-first dive into third.
Did I slide? Was that an optical illusion? You know, Ziggy, what I did is I fell down when I got 10 feet from third. Or Schmitty tripped me, one of the 2.
When the game ended, Pete, Johnny Bench, Tony Perez, and Joe Morgan addressed the fans, then tipped their caps to the crowd. A goosebumps moment to close the stadium in front of a perfectly sized crowd of 41,92.
Oh, it was fun. The people make the whole deal. You know, it was fun.
Did they tinker with that attendance figure a bit to get 41,92? Perhaps, but seeing those 4 great players on the mound at the end of the last event here was perfect. Greg, back to you.
Thank you, Dan. No one inspires passion around here like Peter Edward Rose, one of the baseball legends.
Ken Griffey and Tony Perez joking in the dugout before a game, just like 25 years ago. And the fans are glad to see Tony. Johnny Bench, the greatest catcher of all time, gets a huge cheer. But the signs are all around, even overhead, that the people packed into Synergy Field for one last game want one last look at one person.
What do you think?
Pete Rose, definitely. Pete.
I want to see Pete.
This city's love for Peter Edward Rose showers from the voices in the stands and from the hands of his teammates. For one night, he is back where he belongs, in uniform, on the field, back in the game. If the Big Red Machine doesn't run as smoothly as it did more than 2 decades ago, if Davey Concepcion doesn't cover as much ground at shortstop, if Joe Morgan's hands aren't as sure as they used to be, it doesn't matter to anyone watching. Their heroes had come back to play.
It's like all over again. It's just the neatest thing. To see that infield playing together is the greatest thing.
And the players appreciate being remembered so warmly.
I can't believe it. 40,000 people to come and see a softball game.